who is a journalist. How shall I introduce you? You got so many caps, it's so different identities. I'm lost. Okay, so right. And then Karolina Kobelinski, who he's an anthropologist. I'm not sure I need to introduce you. Probably know half of the room here. So, so anthropologists at Paris Nanterre and at the laboratory of I don't remember the LESC.
Ethnography and comparative sociology.
Ethnography and comparative, yeah, you can say it in English, it's even better. Wonderful. And then a geographer, Cristina del Biaggio, who you already know because she already presented yesterday, and she's from the University of Grenoble and at the PACS, and you all packed, and you also have other identities. And
we all have a lot of identities.
Oh yeah. And then last but not least, Geert who's coming from the Netherlands, who is the head and founder of what he will talk about. It is to say United for Intercultural Action. So it's actually this roundtable this idea was emerged by the co-presence of these people in this venue, because they all share the same interest in the identification of bodies and it's their political implications. So to what extent the very idea of the identification of migrants who died in the Mediterranean and their bodies can be translated into a form of mobilization and activism for the improvement of existing policies. This roundtable, I will ask two series of questions to the speakers. So the first part of this panel is dedicated to the series of these multi-level initiatives taking place at different scales, at the local level, at the meso level of civil society organizations, and at the more macro level in the political arenas. So what's going on? So my first question is for you, Karolina. How do the local actors respond to the needs for care of migrant death?
Do you want the mic later? Yeah, for the recording.
All right, for the recording. So, hello everyone. Of course, it's a huge question I'm not able to answer. There are many local initiatives that you all know. I'm sure you are able to name at least a couple of initiatives related to caring for border crossers. What I will do is just briefly present the one we followed together with Filippo Furri, who was here yesterday. The one we followed in Catania. That means in the east of Sicily, where a small group of people who wanted to find a way to respect their term the dead border crossers whose bodies were arriving to the city, and who ended up building a tool to try to identify these bodies and return them to their families. Just a couple of things about the project, and then another tiny thing related to identification. So this project I'm telling you about emerged in 2017. 17, at a time where disembarkations at the port of Catania as a result of search and rescue operations in the central Mediterranean were becoming less frequent. And as you all know, I'm sure you talked about it yesterday, keep in mind that Catania was between 2015 and 2018 among the most important ports in Italy in terms of arrivals for unauthorized migrants in Italy. So people were disembarking, and at the very same time, bodies were disembarking. In the beginning, the project involved only 3 motivated volunteers from the local Red Cross: Silvia Dizia, Ricardo Reitano, Davide Casella. All of them were involved in these embarkations, since the Red Cross provides, as you all may know, newly arrived migrants with medical first aid, water, biscuits, hygiene kits, etc. And they were also involved at the port in the Red Cross Restoring Family Links program that you may also know about. Just to make it clear, Restoring Family Links began as a program, began several decades ago within the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, originally with the aim of providing help to families searching for their loved ones who were missing as a result of armed conflict or natural disaster. And that now, however, it is largely devoted to helping re-establish family contact that has been lost as a result of the conditions in which border crossings take place. At these embarkations, these volunteers, what they do is to hand out cards to inform people newly arrived that the program may be helpful to, in case of family separation. And I think I'm just mentioning this because I think there is no coincidence that volunteers who are particularly involved in this kind of program, based on the importance of maintaining links with within families, are concerned with these dead bodies. That families, I'm quoting again, that families cannot mourn. That's a sentence we heard many times. So for these people who are present at the time of these embarkations, seeing dead bodies being brought ashore after the survivors have disembarked leaves a huge, strong impression. And this is, of course, exacerbated by the knowledge that although the bodies will be buried in the local cemetery, no public institution is tasked with identifying them or contacting their families in a systematic way. So the team started mapping all the actors who were likely to hold information regarding the bodies, and decided, and were able to, formalize the access to this material produced by a variety of offices. They were able to formalize an agreement with the city council, granting access to the civil registry office, to the municipal undertakers, to the cemetery. And they also signed a convention with the judicial authorities, granting access to the courts and the police. They work from the beginning on the principle that piecing together all the data on a particular body could provide some leads to its identity. So the project quite soon became that of constructing a database, gathering all this existing information that could potentially help to identify the unknown bodies and subsequently to find their families. Just to give you an idea, and I won't talk much about it, but just to give you an idea of the kind of documents we are dealing with here, let me mention the death certificates, forensic inspection forms, survivors' witness statements, declarations of search for a relative, pictures of objects found with the bodies. So the work here involved, first of all, assembling the documents, building the database, and then reading them carefully in search of clues that might lead to a name and to a family. Working a bit in a spirit of historian Carlo Ginzburg's indiciary paradigm. This was the idea. And in this sense, The project implemented in Catania relies, as I said, in a rather, in a quite intuitive way, on a forensic approach, or at least, we were talking earlier about imagination, relies on what we could call forensic imagination, drawing on the concept of archaeological imagination by Michael Shanks, who stresses here the creativity at play, a creativity or a creative work on the remains of the past, for archaeology, rooted in a faculty or a sensibility, Shanks says, dispersed through the cultural reception of the past. This idea of drawing on forensics or an forensic imagination also means, as I see it, drawing on what forensic means. And here, the Latin word forensis, used by Eyal Weizmann to define the practice of forensic architecture as, I quote, a mode of public address and a means of articulating political claims using evidence grounded in the built world, end of quote, could, I think, be helpful or could be used to characterize the team's approach. So this approach that gradually took place in Catania, refining the team's initial experimentations, is, however, a bit different from the corporeal epistemology, to quote Klinenberg's, this epistemology that guides contemporary exhumations and more broadly the work of human rights practitioners worldwide. Because it does not place bodies at the heart of the inquiry, even though it's the starting point of the work done here, but it rather focuses on the traces associated with those bodies, which, and I'm ending here, which were left only at the point of their instantaneous contact with power. And I'm using here a quote from Michel Foucault's work on the lives of infamous men. And I end it here. I'll be back later.
Thank you, Carolina. So yeah, from these very local and spontaneous reactions of this kind of forensic citizenship, and we talked about Reneke earlier, and now to the more possibly organized action of the civil society. So Geerts, can you let us know about the work of your organization? By the way, the field work which has been done by Filippo and Carolina has been published recently. It's fantastic advertising.
Maybe it's my English part.
Oh, it doesn't. No, it doesn't zoom.
Zoom.
I want full screen.
Full screen.
Right, like so.
Yeah.
Oh. Because I know I'm a boring speaker, I prepared you an overview of art and activism and commemoration over, let's say, the last 20 years with the list. I shouldn't stare at it myself. How long do I have?
Roughly 10 minutes.
Okay, I will try. Oh, you. Okay, I'm very happy to be here because I'm usually not going to this kind of conferences, but usually the activist conferences where people jump up and start yelling "No borders, no borders, no borders," and this is a bit a bit different context. I like that also, but it's interesting for me. I'm not so much an expert on the topic of identification legislation. I'm not an expert on that, but I'm a networker since '92 or longer already, with 1992 in the anti-racism movement. And let's say I will try to describe in my talk. I will try to explain in my talk how this shifted from, let's say, a awareness raising on border deaths, because when we started in 92, almost nobody knew about it in Europe, and now in trying to reach out and change the voting of people. My phone wants to sleep. Me too, maybe. I need my notes. Okay. United started in 1992 as a European. No, it started in 1992 in Strasbourg at the European Youth Center, where we were holding, I was a bit younger then, a youth conference against racism. And in the same time, people in Germany, the Turkish people were attacked, arson attacks on their houses. People died in Solingen, for example. And we noticed that people present there in Strasbourg, that there was a lot of action, but nothing coordinated. So nobody knew about each other, enormous political differences. And also in that time in France, there were big anti-racism movement, but they didn't want to work together, political profile, religious profile. And we thought this has to be done better. You can also not... Sorry, I will switch off the setting of the phone, because that is automatic. Never. Okay, done. Sorry. No, we wanted to connect the movement better, and it was before internet. At that time, we still worked with fax and by post and sending documents to the bank and whatever. So life has changed enormously. But at that time, it was the real moment to start a movement against racism Europe-wide. And we didn't want to be a political movement. We just wanted to network, so to bring good practices together and to unite the movement. And that means Europe-wide, but the larger Europe, so also Russia, also Azerbaijan, Council of Europe countries, and also cross-movement, so migration movement, refugee movement, anti-racism, anti-fascism, because in that time they didn't cooperate. And that has changed a lot, by the way. So at the moment, many organizations, let's say anti-fascist organizations, work for migration issues. We started a small secretariat in Amsterdam. We set it up common campaigning. You have seen the poster collection of 30 years campaigning. And we make big conferences every year. And by this networking, we started, so messages started to reach us from Germany, that people were drowning in the, at that time, outside border of the EU river between Poland and Germany, the Oder-Neisse border. Bodies were found in the river, and the border guards, so it was only 3 years after the wall fell, the border guards were pushing the bodies with sticks back in the river so that they floated to the Baltic Sea, because both Poland and Germany were not interested in having this trouble. And we got small clippings from newspapers and from organizations in that area telling us that people were dying, one and another one and another one. And at the Secretariat, we thought, hey, nobody knows about this. Let's start writing it down. So at that moment, just to, let's say, to process the information we got from the network. Some years, no, I don't know when, I guess some years later, we got to 1,000 deaths on our list. And we thought, okay, let's reach out to the media, because it's a sad thing. We have to have figures to reach out. So 1,000, we went to the media, nobody interested. Later on, 10,000, nobody interested. 20,000, nobody interested. Until in 2018, The Guardian, it's laying around there, picked up our list and made a website in the context of the Liverpool Biennale exhibition, where Banu Senetoglu, Turkish artist who works with our list in public space, where she published our list, and The Guardian made a supplement also with the help of Banu. I don't know, I think 62 pages. And that changed our campaign enormously. Until that time, we hardly got in the news. There was few artists working with it, but such an amount of information in a famous newspaper as The Guardian lifted the campaign over the hill. Which was weird for us, because I remember I got interviews all over the world on the radio, like in America on All Things Considered, which is has a huge outreach. And in fact, they were not asking why there are border deaths, but they were asking why does The Guardian publish so many pages for an NGO? which is indeed not very common. Anyway, the list was always made by different people because we had a small secretariat, we never had a lot of money, the list was never funded. So we collected information in the beginning through clippings from newspapers over the network, then internet and other lists and so on. And we tried to research them, and that was done as a voluntary job by a mix of people from all kinds of nationalities that came for a year to United Office. For a long time, we worked with Venice University Migration Department, and so a lot of different people working on it, never funding, and also no, let's say, really time for outreach. But we aimed to create a tool for others, and in the beginning it was mainly NGOs, to act, like to read our list, to act like things you see behind me. To our surprise, a lot of artists picked it up, and interestingly, artists have a, for us, refreshing take on the problem, because we are stuck in our activism. We want to change the world tomorrow, and we want people to act and change their voting. And artists highlighted difficult things in our list. For example, I never thought about that so many people had no name. Yeah, like Arkady said, 99%. But then an artist on an exhibition highlighted in our list just a no name, so completely red. And that made us think, wow, this is a disaster within the disaster. So that so many people die is terrible, and that Europe doesn't do any effort to identify them and to inform the families is another trouble. So at a certain moment, the figure, you can also imagine you are partly researchers. So in research, you can have a success. You find something, and you can. So we get this twisted feeling in the office that we find border deaths, and we're happy with it because it adds to the figure. And you get this twisted emotion. No, it's about people. And we also hang pictures in our office of people that died just to create a link to not constantly be digging in somebody's death as a research topic. But anyway, we shifted a bit from figures to more political issues and the issue of non-identification. And at the same time, since The Guardian published, the use of our list is booming. I get, I think, 2 or 3 times a week a request for our extended list. We have an extended list for researchers with many more data, searchable. And so these researchers do something with the list, and most of them, it hurts me as a networker, most of them don't know what the others are doing. So it's a lot of different researchers, also with kind of strange perceptions. Like I think even in Ghent University, somebody was checking with our list how bad how worse the situation became every year. Honestly, you cannot see that because we don't manage. We have a too small team. We cannot manage to type all. So what you see is how much we manage to type, and you cannot see the piles we have laying for processing. So we need help, and we need, and that's why we're happy to be in this project now with University Ghent, because it helped us financially because we have a basic structure now that we can keep up. And since the whole list had never funding, that was very difficult to promise that we could go on. And I'm getting older, and somehow I hope I get older. I also don't see myself stopping, but we have to somehow get to a point where this list will be in public space and can kind of exist by itself. Interesting for me also to touch is Thomas Spijkerboer, who was, I think, one of the first big researchers that used our list as a starting point to research the policies of Fortress Europe. He compared, so we stated that this is very bad and that all these people died, but it's not scientifically proven because we use sources, media sources, NGO sources. And he took the list and worked with the whole team around the Mediterranean borders to compare death registration and graveyards. And I think some people worked on it. Where is she? Oh, so she's there. Georgia's there. She worked on that. So it started from a discussion we had about the list, and then it became a big project. And in the end, he could prove that every policy measure of the EU creates more deaths. And that also means we did change the name of our campaign because we started the fatal realities of Fortress Europe because nobody knew about it. to the fatal policy support of Europe, because it was proven scientifically that it was the problem. In the beginning, I can say it was mainly accident, people drowning in a river to avoid crossing the border. There wasn't a real policy on that, and at the moment, I was never very emotional on the situation, because we want to reach something, so we work and work and work. But now, honestly, when reading this news every day from all over Europe, Libyan boats crashing, small rubber boats and so on, all the EU deals, our prime minister going to Tunisia, it's getting difficult. It's getting really difficult, because it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Which feels also weird, because we tried to change the world, and after 32 years changing the world, it's getting worse, so I kind of failed. Still, it doesn't take away my motivation to make this visible, especially since, it kind of fell asleep. Yeah, we can finalize. Yeah, I have later a little bit more, but for now I think it's enough.
Yeah, especially questions. Yeah, thank you very much. And so now what's impressive is that you started in 92, which was the first documents referring to the deterrence through prevention through deterrence, the term itself, appeared only in 94 in a document of the US Border Patrol. So you started even before the term appeared, but the dynamics was already there in a sense, and that's what your existence proves. So you started to mention the possibility to upscale the debate, and including among policymakers, and that's what we have been trying to do, Charles, through your different initiatives. So please.
Or this one.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, you can keep it running. So I apologize first for being late today, and for leaving early today as well, because I'm running a training in about 25 minutes with Latin American journalists. So I'm happy that we can do both today. Travel in the morning and then attend a conference, and at the same time help people on the other part of the world. But I really want to apologize for that, because I don't think it's as respectful as I would like, but this is a bit the life that I run. So to connect a little bit with what previous speakers were saying, I initially came across this topic because I entered into a civil society organizations in 2010 that had just won a grant from the European Union to establish the first formal network of journalists reporting on migration across West Africa, North Africa, and Southern Europe. I was in no way involved in writing that proposal, but I just arrived in that organization as a young graduate from Sciences Po. I had graduated in finance in 2008, the biggest financial crisis. So that was a great decision I had taken. And so I end up looking for a job, and some very nice lady goes on maternity leave, and I end up doing her work. So I was completely ignorant in this whole issue. But what was interesting is that I was involved in basically trying to support some of the people that were producing the work that organizations like United were relying on. We know that a lot of the information, the lists that have been drawn up just because people have been able to document cases through a small clipping, or because they were present or heard of or whatever, which also invites us to think about everything that's happening in spaces where there are no journalists. I often hear that the Mediterranean Sea is the deadliest sea crossing in the world. That's completely, it's a hypothesis. When you go to Djibouti and you walk a little bit outside of Djibouti, you will find remains much more quickly than when you go sailing in the Mediterranean. But obviously there is a very, very limited pool of journalists in Djibouti or the broader region. And more importantly, there is no political interest to support quality journalism in Djibouti or Yemen or Saudi Arabia or anywhere else around that specific area, if you want. And obviously, I was asked to do that in a specific area because part of the mandate was to train French journalists, but not train French journalists in the Comorian archipelago, for example, which was not perceived as where the work had to be done, and where we know that in the sea crossings to Mayotte, countless numbers of deaths, and I don't know how many go reported or registered or whatever. Anyways, I found myself basically bringing together journalists from different countries, and I was completely free to do whatever I wanted, and I enjoyed that a lot. I still do, but it brought me to do things that were completely demonstrative of the ridiculous. I would say it's ridiculous if it wasn't dramatic aspect of the policy. So, for example, I remember bringing a journalist from Senegal who had a very hard time getting his visa to Melilla. So basically, we were bringing a journalist from Africa to Africa. But he had to go through Madrid because you cannot fly to Melilla, and it was not possible for him to cross the border between Nador and Melilla by land, the Spanish enclave in Morocco. And the Spanish embassy in Dakar could not understand why a journalist who was obviously going to run away once he landed at Madrid airport was presenting a case for visa to go to Melilla because nobody's interested in going there. I warned this journalist, Jacques, not to take pictures because it's a very military protected area. And he took a picture of Border Patrol on their motorcycle with the EU flag, got arrested. And when I was in the Melilla police with him, I told him, it's ironic because the budget of the EU that funded that motorcycle is the very same one that brought this journalist. So we funded our whole problem together. Right next to a beautiful golf course, actually, that was also funded by European taxpayer money. And you can play golf in Melilla looking at the border crossings directly if that's something you fancy to do. And so that really caught my attention. And then we did other workshops. We went to Sfax in 2013, where we met Professor Samir Maktoum, the director of the forensics. I think the only forensics doctor at the time in Sfax Hospital, who had countless bodies that were waiting for him to try to do whatever he could. And that was the beginning, of my interest. And so it stuck with me until Carolina called me a couple of years ago and said, the School of Medicine here is organizing a conference on identifying unknown remains. And so I discovered a little bit what was described previously, which is so many interesting different things, but completely scattered and not connected. And I was a little bit, like Geerts, empowered by the idea that it was necessary to network, first of all, bring these things together, and push also for policy change. I completely agree that, if policy is doing this, maybe policy can either undo it or at least repair it. And which is a big part of the problem. The mic is dead, but, oh no, okay, it's come back. Was that what I found is that there was, for European Union at least, we're talking of here in the context of migration, even though the issue of unidentified remains or unidentified bodies in Europe and elsewhere goes way beyond migration, by the way. It's what makes it maybe more visible to people, what people understand, but a little bit like was said earlier, that often African-American or former slaves were buried with low-paid or working-class people, or this issue goes across society and touches a lot of different people living on the street, etc. The question of bodies arriving in a hospital with no formal identity. And what was striking is I was seeing the boom of DNA, and it was accessible. I could do my own DNA testing every day. If I wasn't satisfied with the first result, I could try to take another part of my skin to see if my ancestry is the one I want. On the other hand, we were seeing these lists growing and growing, and basically nothing can be done to identify. That was a little bit what was said. And so this is how I got involved and faced, I think, the current challenges that we have in terms of policy around this question. Because it's true at the European level, what we have is a lot of grassroots, local level work, which, because it is not it is genuinely grassroots work, the databases that have been set up here and there are not made to match each other. And the whole idea of forensics identification is actually matching. That's the whole philosophy. And so this is where we are currently in trying to say, we have everything around, thanks to the fabulous work of so many people who've done lists, grassroots level work, taken care of their local communities, etc. But first of all, we don't have interoperability between this work. And secondly, we have never really established a formal protocol about how to deal with these situations. And both actually respond to each other, because since we don't have a top-down approach and there is no political will, let's say it like this, on this topic, what we have is a mass of information, but no capacity to get this information to connect to one another. The European Union today does not want to do anything on this topic and has a very convenient shield, which is that basically forensics is either law enforcement or is a medical issue that is not part of the European Union mandate. And I've come to the conclusion that the European Union is not the good forum to advocate for standardized protocols on identification of remains, at least for the moment. The Council of Europe is to some extent a very interesting institution to look at. This year, 2024, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of Recommendation 99.3, which is basically harmonization of autopsy protocols in Europe. It has nothing to do with identification, but basically came through work of the Council of Europe, which said we are united in some ideas, and so basically our countries could harmonize their approach to autopsy practices. And when you speak to people like Tanya, who was here yesterday, they rely considerably on this work that was done by Ministry of Foreign Affairs at the end, a committee, a Council of Europe committee recommendation is a decision by Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And so we're at a very timely moment. About 16 or 17 days ago, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe adopted the Palke report. Julian Palke used to be on search and rescue ships. Then he became a politician, got elected at the Bundestag, and then went to the Council of Europe as a representative of the Bundestag. And so one of the things he did based on his experience was to say, let's do a report on the issue of missing migrants and identification. The production of the report is out there, it was adopted. Very interesting to look at the debate that happened and how some members of the Parliamentary Assembly go as far as to tell you that people have no right to have their identity found and that it would be a scandal to recognize that as a right. So it's also at times very interesting to look at what people who are opposing these type of policies have to say, because that's what you need to fight also to some extent. And they will find legal text to defend. It can be privacy issues. We had this big problem in France for a long time. You could not store data from unidentified remains because you did not have the authorization from that person to store their personal data. And here GDPR regulation become very convenient if you want to silence the situation. But you can overcome that. And it's ironically, actually, the data from unidentified remains in France is stored in the same database as data from convicted criminals. Because that was the only data, biological data that we could store was after a criminal conviction for a sex offender. And the unidentified remain of a little girl or boy that has been killed by a sex offender today rests in the same database as the criminal, which is another ironic, if not dramatic, situation that we have right now. So the Palke report has been sent 15 days ago to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of all Council of Europe member states. I've yet to see any reactions. They must be busy doing something else. But, and they have 1 year before it goes to the dustbin. So if that report does not lead to anything concrete, like an update of recommendation 1993, which would say harmonization of unidentified remains protocols, for example. For all bodies without identification found on European soil, this is what you need to do. And despite the fact that it's not a unified registry, this is the type of information, the detailed lists to some extent that Geert was talking about. This is the detailed forensics list that you should take. And people like Tanya that you saw yesterday, which are really at the forefront of forensics innovation in dealing with these type of cases. She receives every week emails of people thanking her for having established the link between a body that has been recovered in the suburbs of Paris in a wood and a family back in another region. Could really help us design those protocols. So that's a little bit where we stand now. Don't have much more to say than that. But definitely, I was really interested in listening to Geert's experience. I think you were asking what my title is. I don't really have a title, but that capacity that I'm working on is the networking capacity. A little bit, I think, what I saw in Adam's presentation as well, people that are doing work in cemeteries that are maybe 300 or 400 miles away don't know each other until someone, just because he's doing his own research, gets to meet them. And then because he's launching a book or it's his birthday or I don't know what, they get to meet. And then they dramatically improve the way they work just by meeting. And so it's kind of ironic to say that despite all of the networking capacities that we have, we are still very obsolete in the way we handle this. But I'm quite confident, and Thomas and the organizers, I thank you for giving me a platform to share that optimism. I'm very much like Geert, very saddened by everything that I read every day. But it's what keeps us very active as well. One last thing I mentioned over lunch to some people, the Pew Research Center published last year updated figures on the death of fishers, international fishers, which previously was 30,000 international fishers die every year, and it's been updated to 100,000. And I don't like to compare figures because you're talking of human lives and relatives and very sensitive cases for each and everyone that's involved. But for as much as it's important that we continue the work that we're doing, we need to recognize also that this is just the beginning of a huge fight against the acceptance of silent death. And especially the sea is I think Ian Urbina, the New York Times reporter, quoted it this way: the sea is the perfect crime scene. In the sea, there is no body. There is no bullet if the person was shot. And there is no responsibility, especially in international waters. And so we must continue with the cases that we have, but we must not forget that for every case we know, there are maybe 10 times or 20 times more cases that we don't know. And so you will not find solace once we've changed the protocols here, because there will be other protocols to change elsewhere. So that's it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Charles. Unfortunately, you have to leave now, but he won't be here for the questions. But if you want to keep in touch with him, he's on the mailing list of the Scientifiques mailing list, and I can also put you in touch if you want. Yeah, for the moment, yeah. Cristina, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I think I will jump in, but it's a bit difficult because I feel like really small in what I'm trying to do. And I just pick the words, really the words that Charles said and the others, like scattered, bring things together, matching, interoperability, networking. And I think that one of my identity, if you say I have many, one is, I'm quite maniac in archiving things. So I think it's not by chance or whatever that I started how many? Yeah, whether we sit here together. How many years ago? I mean, it's some years ago.
10,000 mails ago.
Yeah, 10 times. Once he told me that I sent him like 10,000 mails. I said to Geerts, I said, but you're just saying a number like that. So no, this is the true number. It's not.
Did you archive them?
Yeah, and he's archiving. He's even more mad than me. No, so joking here, but I think it's before the list was published by The Guardian that I started sending you a couple of emails saying, oh, there's even this and this, and there's an error in your list, and maybe this is not correct, and so there I started, to be familiar with the list and familiar with Geerts' work, and really, how to say, really admirative. How do you say in English? Involved? No. Admiring the work of Geerts, and being as well, with this challenge in my mind, saying, what will happen when Geerts will stop doing the list, and this is where I started saying to myself, it's not possible to stop doing this, because we all know here how important it is to count, not just for counting, but counting is as well, this is like a major political challenge, as Carolina and Stéphane Lacroix said in a previous book, which is called La mort aux frontières. So we are all aware of this. Counting is just counted for counting and giving numbers, but it's this book, and actually I don't know if you have it's in German. It's the list printed. I have the 3 editions, and I don't know if you have seen it. The first one was like that, the second one like that, and this is the new version of the list. So it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and for me, I think it's an heritage, this list, and something that has to be kept as an heritage, but something that has to be as well continued, that improved as well in the way it's done. I mean, Geerts is doing a wonderful job, but Geerts is doing this job almost alone for 30 years.
I was never doing this.
No, alone, coordinating the job, let's say, yeah, but well, so for 30 years, and I said as well, I won't see myself doing this for the next 30 years. So it's out of this encounter with the list and with Geerts, and as well with my own research more on land borders than on maritime borders, where I discovered, from 2015 onwards, where we were acknowledging as well a lot of persons dying crossing land borders and not only the maritime borders, and realizing how many different organizations, NGOs, journalists, researchers, everywhere in the European space, wherever there is border crossing, border militarization, and then border that they were doing their own list, trying to collect their own information, new ways of counting as well. Geerts said, with the work of Georgia and the team in Amsterdam, trying to collect information not only from events or from media sources, but as well from the symmetries and the bodies, and so they were. Everybody is doing again and taking, this idea of scattered databases that we have all around Europe now. If we think about Europe, and what you're gonna do with all these bits of information that is just parts of information that can potentially be in a more complete list that can be used as well, in a political way, in a scientific way, in a way of lobbying as well at political stages. And so just I'm trying. I don't know why, but somehow I had this idea of, everybody is saying, and no, there's another thing. It's probably as well because a lot of persons working trying to count that persons and that bodies at the European in the European border regions. They are anthropologists, qualitative geographers, social scientists, and we meet and we have a lot of meetings together and discussions, and we all came up with the same question or with the same conclusion, which is, okay, what we need is a unique database where we can collect everything, and so this is what we should do. It's like, yes, and nobody's doing, because nobody has actually the tools to do it. Nobody is from, quantitative background, and so I said to myself, okay, Cristina, just take the challenge, and actually, if you know somebody who is a PhD doctor and has these wonderful, IT skills and database skills. We are searching for a postdoc, starting from December this year. So this is, a bit the way I was doing in privately and then professionally in trying to try to match, render interoperable, I don't know how to say this one in English, all this information that I think it's important to have because it's a political issue as well.
Thank you, Cristina. There is an actor, or category of actors we haven't talked so much about. It's the people and the families and the organizations from the South. And so, Carolina, can you tell us about the efforts of to attempts to bridge the southern and northern shores of the Mediterranean in that regard?
Yeah. Once again, I won't be able to answer this question. So I'm here representing or trying to talk at the local level, the small level. So of course, the project I was telling you about earlier in Catania intends to create bridges and works in order to provide elements useful for linking the relatives with the disappeared they are looking for. And the way they do it is through the database at work. They also do it in another way. We won't talk about it today, but which has to do with more symbolic and emotional dimension that implies taking care of the dead, trying to make them a room in their own lives, but that doesn't bring the families. But what I would like to say, just as a tiny element for an answer, is to mention some of the ways of facilitating the flow of information about death, shipwrecks, and people looking for missing relatives that I've observed among border crossers themselves. And Charles was talking about the Melilla, Morocco borderland. And what I've observed there, and not only there, is that there are a huge range of actions that are being put in place using by border crossers themselves at the border, using the phone, using the social media. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of obvious now. But when I started observing it, it seemed, at least I didn't have a mobile, like a smartphone at the time. So well, whatever. What I want to mention is that the news, for instance, the news of a shipwreck bursting into the phones of my interlocutors in an unexpected way when I was doing fieldwork there, or receiving messages informing that boats have disappeared, that dead bodies were found somewhere, that others were missing somewhere else. that was and still is something frequent. And that makes people contact friends, contact acquaintances, because obvious reaction, they want to make sure that their loved ones are not among the dead, are not among the missing. But they also want, I think, from the experience I have, they also want to help obtain information that could be useful in order to find out the identity and make this link with the families. In fact, all the people I met and I talked with about this on both sides of the border told me stories about how they were able to connect a name with the body, which does not necessarily mean an official identification. We are not talking about that here. Now, I'm not talking about that. But connecting a name with the body by using this kind of circulation, informal threads of circulation of information. Because for most of my interlocutors, contacting families in the event of death is a way of preventing total disappearance, which is how several border crossers, at least French speakers, describe the material and symbolic obliteration that results from disappearing without any trace. So announcing the death makes it possible to deal with the dead, as we all know from classic anthropology of death, which is not the case with the missing, which is not the case with the disappeared. And this circulation, which is the thing that is the most important thing here, I think, takes information beyond the border. And I'm just saying a very, very tiny thing that happened to me not a long while ago, where I found myself in a shelter, Foyer des Travailleurs Maliens, in the Parisian region here, not far away. And I saw there how a picture of a body found at the border arrived on the phone of a Malian friend of mine who had been living here for 15 or even 20 years. And he explained to me that the body was that of a Malian man called, I'm inventing his name, Sissoko, and that by circulating the picture of this body, whom they know he was a Sissoko, they were trying, I will come back to the they here, they were trying to see if anyone could recognize him or know of that Sissoko family, one of whose members, a man in his 20s, had gone to sea from Libya at that time. So I asked him, who is sending the picture? How is it working? Say, well, I cannot explain, but I received it. We receive that kind of things all the time. Most of the people who are making it to circulate this kind of information are from the Kaya region in Mali. But that's something we've been doing for at least a couple of years, that he told me not long ago. So what I'm trying to say is that these practices might not be or are not necessarily standardized or systematized, but their aim is also to build bridges with families who are searching, who are partly on the other side of the Mediterranean, but who are partly elsewhere, and that counts a lot, because at least in Catania, we've seen many parents, cousins, brothers who were somewhere in Europe and who were told that maybe their cousin, brother, sister, father, maybe that person was among the survivors or the dead after a shipwreck, and were able to go down to Sicily, which is not usually the case for the ones who are on the other side of the border. So I will just end saying that I think in that doing this kind of very tiny practices, it's all about establishing bridges, but it's also about trying to counter disappearance and, if needed, transform the disappeared into the dead. And at the very same time, it's also a way, and we were discussing with this Malian friend, I got the feeling that it is also a way of imprinting a trace. And you were talking earlier about counting, and you said not only count in terms of statistics, but to make them count. And I thought that in Spanish, contar is to count, to making it count, and it's also to narrate. And I think that is part of the thing as well.
Thank you very much. It's amazing. We keep on exploring the different forms of community buildings through this. So we talked about the Landmannschaft, and we talked about this activist community maintaining the cemeteries, and now these forensic communities online. It's absolutely fascinating. So Geert, I wanted to give you the last word. I know it's dangerous.
That's easy. No more debt.
Yeah. So how do you see your work? How can you build on your work to lobby the actors and to try to change the way of the current policies and the current functioning of the border?
Yeah, it's maybe a little bit weird because United is really a network, and always, since it's an open network, so it was for many years bringing over 500 organizations together. We don't do the lobby ourselves because the network is so much divided that we decided to create tools, not to have difficult discussions, just to collect information that can be used by others. So lobby is done by, you can see the pictures, by many organizations active with the list. So we provide a tool. But I would hope, let's say, our struggle is also more still at the moment, like the question you raised, how to work with Africa, because we are a European network, so we never worked with Africa, and it becomes very necessary. And there's all these deaths in the Sahara we don't yet include in the list because we hardly get any information. So we are creating links and trying to make things better and more precise, and then we hope for others to make it more complete. Or make it sustainable, because it will not stop. But okay, our own agenda is to reach out outside our obvious network. So our obvious network is, like I said, the people, no borders, or. And I'm very happy at the moment we reach theaters, we reach churches, like all the big churches in Switzerland act on 20 June by reading the whole list, like now for 36 hours. And it means that I always say I want to reach my mother. Not the people in this room that anyway know what is happening, but I want to reach the people that have to change their voting. So we campaign around European elections for, I think there's a poster somewhere that your vote can unite, your vote can divide, you decide, something like this. People have to stop voting populist parties and stop creating a crisis related. The word crisis and migration is not correct. So that is, let's say, what we try to do, but it's a long way. A second maybe road, also interesting, is our task, I would see, is also, like you explained, networking, because by networking you make the message bigger and better. And the third one that is starting a bit is to support people's tribunals. There have been some attempts over the years, and usually they contact me and we discuss. And yes, we keep archive. Let's say even our archive is kept in the International Institute of Social History. So of every case, we have a print. So we keep it. Yeah, except for when you want one. But no, I can say we always have a print, but sometimes we don't find it. But everything is kept for future. So I really think, as a human being, that one day there will be even a criminal court case about this, because it's going over all limits. And so we keep on doing our work, we collect it, and we keep on yelling no more deaths, but the situation is not improving. So we have a lot of work to do together. And one question to you: you can do two things to help us. You can follow our Instagram, where we publish actions, because it helps our outreach. And secondly, share information. Because the strange thing is that I meet many organizations and many researchers that say, oh, we think you're a big institute, you don't want it. No, we want everything, and we process it. So if you make any report or you find them, don't do a lot of effort, any language, we don't care, just mail it to List of Deads at United, and we do something with it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So you can keep on showing the... No? No, you want to stop?
I can leave it on. But
leave it on, yeah. Right, so now there is a time for Q&A. So do you have any question for panelists? I'm sure you have.
Thank you so much for the panel. And I wanted to follow up with a question about the names, the emphasis on legal names and the format of lists of names. And just to be really clear, this comes from, to use a word that escaped us earlier, total admirer of all the work you all presented, but I'm trying to be inspired by Sid and probe uncomfortable places. So the legal name, of course, has this long tradition, this genealogy of importance and connection to legal personhood in kind of Anglo-European settings. I did some field work with a team in Uganda this summer, and people's names are very relational, right? There's the name you use when you're with your mother's side of the family, the name you use with your father's side of the family, the name you had until adulthood, the name you have in church, the name, et cetera. So I'm conscious, first of all, that that a number of speakers have posited a tremendous moral and political difference in the status of the dead based on whether a particular legal name is attached to them. But I wonder about naming practices, right, amongst the communities these folks came from, and whether the legal names we put in the list are the kind of answer to some fundamental key to that person's identity in the way that activists located in the US and Europe may conceive of them. And then I'm also thinking about that the format of public lists of names, which in my understanding is a relatively recent form of memorialization that has its own genealogy attached to things like the memorial to the American War in Vietnam in Washington, D.C., Maya Lin's memorial. And again, just one tidbit from Uganda that's relevant is a local human rights activist pointing to some of the memorials that have been placed for victims of the Civil War there, and saying, like, these are from NGOs and missionaries. Like, we know in the community, we know that tree is near where the people died. We don't take a bunch of concrete and like put it in a field. And so he saw a lot of the memorial projects as this kind of Christianized missionary NGO thing, right? So I was just wondering whether in the kind of communities from which these migrants come, whether amongst their families, you've seen any, not even necessarily pushback, but just like different logics, different priorities in terms of either the name or that format of the list of names, other logics that people attached to memorialization.
A difficult question, because I work with NGOs in Europe, and we are missing the work. So let's say through the project we do with Necropolis, we suddenly have another platform with a bi-monthly meeting with African community in Brussels. But we work with for years with a lot of migrant and refugee organizations all over Europe. and they always like to make a list because they want to be listed. I start to learn now that some people don't want to be listed. I also start to learn that interesting lecture we had in a Necropolis United project that you cannot list, in fact, missing people by name because that's against all legislation. And honestly, I don't care. We are activists and we want to write it down, and we are happy when we find a name. But we are a little bit more careful now. We're happy because the only real feedback we get from migrant communities, example, Albanian man living in Italy that escaped Albania 30 years ago with a little boat. He lost his family, and we have his family on our list without a name. And like 5 years ago, he contacted us and said, "Wow, I found your list. I was thinking about my family, and I'm so glad that you make a memorial online. Can you please add their names?" So we don't get any complaints. We get more, "Please add names." But I think our main trouble is that we are not, it's a language issue. I think also our network is English speaking. And we lack the French branch. I do understand French, but it's really not our network language. And the whole work with Africa we have to pick up. So to find better the needs. But for now, we continue as we do. We make a list. Anybody else can make another list, but we make a list that is trying to give two things, to be a tool, but also it grew into a grave. It's the only place where people are mentioned, and we try to mention. Oh, what I also needed to say is we have also troubles. There's lots of troubles underlying. We have troubles because people, like Chinese people, you cannot really translate the names. So you saw it, maybe Chinese artists translated all the Chinese names on our list back to original names. But we have no idea how to do this in FileMaker database. And similar with other names, we take something and it's often a huge. I mean, if you have 10 sources, you find 10 different names. It's messy, and we are not an expert in this, so we could need help.
I can say something.
Yeah, I can say something as well.
Yeah, please do.
No, the question about naming, and just maybe come back to what we experienced with Filippo Furi in Ventimiglia. And it's as well, the question of networking, and then as well the networking, the local administration, the researchers, the activists, and we were, as researchers, like being the persons who could start making the link between local municipalities and activists. And one of the questions was about the name. The local activists had one of these local lists of persons who died at the border, and the majority of the lines of the list were persons without name, so they were unidentified or without name. And we went to the local municipality, and actually we discovered that the local civil servant in the municipality, she gave to us all the certificates of deaths, which are public in France. I discovered that in Switzerland they are private. So she gave us these 30 certificates of death, and in every certificate of death there was a name. And we were quite surprised to see the difference between people living there and working on this topic for so long, and the local administration who was just close by, and nobody was just speaking to each other because they didn't know how to approach the local administration. But then even now we have I have this actually Geerts does not know that I have all the names, because if not he will publish them directly. No, which is not true. But we do not know what to do with that, because first of all we do not know if we asked where the name came from, and some of the names come from for example, the German police. So the German police gave a name to the public prosecutor in France. They gave it to the local municipality. They said, this is the name, but actually this is the name, is probably the name that was given when the person was registered in Lampedusa, for example. So we do not know if this name is the real name. And what do you do if you publish this name and there's kind of a double problem? Maybe, the family who's searching for the missed person, they think, oh, this is not my son, because my son, it's not his name. Or the opposite, maybe they think it's my son, and actually it is not. And this is, it's not your answer on, how to really deal anthropologically, if you want, with names, but you have as well a kind of technical problem, if you are, or how do you deal with this question? And then I finish with that. There's what they decided to do in Ventimiglia, the local activist community, was as well, in order to try to find, to reach the identification, and whatever kind of identification, either the official one, or just to give the name to the family and reestablish the link with the family, is that every time that there's a person who died, they make a kind of symbolical funeral and a commemoration, with the idea as well that they would be able maybe to find to gather the community, so that they might have the community there that could help to identify the others that died. And what happened once is that they published one name where they were not sure that this name was the real name, but what happened is that the images circulated of the ceremony, and one cousin in Belgium or the Netherlands or something like that saw the images with this name, and this was possible actually thanks to this recognition and the inscription of the name to this person to come, and then they identify it that way. So it's really somehow difficult to know, should we make it public or not? And even, with this aim of maybe it's possible to gather more information and to reestablish the links with the family.
Just 2 seconds to say that once again, talking about Catania's project and the people gravitating around it, although these people, of course, they want to get in touch with the family, and for that they need legal names. They are at the same time always naming people in very creative ways. And I'm going back to your what you pointed out about the relational aspect of naming. And just to give you an idea of what I'm thinking about here is that they are most of the time, not always, but most of the time trying to avoid the code that is given to the body by the administration or by the police, the one that is in the plaque at the cemetery, and taking instead either something they've read somewhere in a fragment of a document, or maybe something they heard among the survivors, or even something else. For instance, there is this woman they know nothing about. The only thing they know is that she had a tattoo of a star in here. And all of them call her the woman with the star. And so the woman with the star is a way of naming. It's a way, and it's very relational, because the only thing they know about her is that she had a tattoo. And they know that she had a tattoo, not because they were able to see the body, because they arrived later, but they saw the picture taken by the forensics, by the scientific police, and then they imagined a story.
Can I add one second? Because about the names, what you see, what I picked up from internet, this is the list they create in Calais. Every time when a boat sinks and people die, they add the name. So that's why it says different colors, and they read them and they take a minute silence. This is in fact interesting for me because it's the group directly working in the camp and directly so a lot of migrants involved themselves, and they do try to do a big effort to get all the names together, and that is for me rather new because we usually don't have such good information.
Thank you. So we can take a round of questions. So you get to Georgia, Sid, and Yumna. Go ahead.
I just want to make a quick comment and connect with our previous conference in Hong Kong last January about the names and the power the names carry. And we showed the film called Names, Asmat by Dagmawi, who just through the films, he just recites the names, the recovered names, not the old names of those of Lampedusa tragedy of October 3rd, 2013. So the name has it's become like a memorial site or a way to memory. So yeah.
Yes, I think this is really just a comment, but sort of answering Adam's point, one of the things that the Last Rights Project have been working on is a little bit truncated with COVID, but was looking at memorialization with a World Universities program. And we visited Ghana principally to look at how memorialization of slavery and thinking about how that could be used in representing memorialization of migrant deaths. And we talked to families of bereaved families who'd lost people crossing the Sahara and up to Libya and beyond across the Mediterranean. And we didn't expect them to say, we don't want the bodies back, we don't want to remember them, we don't consider that they had good deaths. And that is by no means an empirical study, and it's not typical, but it's also an issue within certain communities and certain customs that people who leave or people who die below a certain age or people who die in a certain way don't warrant a particular form of remembrance. So it is very conflicted when you start to talk, particularly with families, about what they want. So, but we haven't followed that up yet.
Thank you. Sorry? I took the mic from someone.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. When I was doing the project for human coastal border control, and I was searching for in the cemeteries, something that struck me about the idea of relational name was that the local widows visiting their loved one in the cemeteries, when they get out, they used to go, for example, in the province of Agrigento, they used to go to visit their loved ones, and then on the way out, they often leave flowers or peluche, is English peluche? Like puppets to the graves, to the so-called the border death. And when I interviewed them, I saw that they use names for those people. First, for example, in the cemeteries, for example, they rename death, so they rebaptize death in the moment of the funeral, the unknown migrants, with the name of local saint patrons, or with the name of the popes, or relevant names for local community. And which is actually happened also in Kutro's case from last year. A baby was called Paula because she was buried in São Paula village. But they also use other kind of names, such as, or actually nicknames, like Chatumeo, which in Sicilian means my breath, my breath of my breath, Sangumeo, my blood, Povero Cristo, poor Christ. And when they were saying this name, they also used to rehearse tropes of the death, like "Poor Christ, why you died," and this miskino, which is another term I discussed in another publication. But the point here is that I would like to come back for a moment on the concept of this conference, which is forensic. And we have discussed some devices that also in the forensic turn are used. The archive, the idea of archiving, like the storing, as if the opposite of injustice is not justice, but is remember. The idea of the list, no, and listing the names and the fact that have factualization of what happened. And in the list, what is important, the semiotic aspect of the list is what it includes and what it excludes. So the list has also this kind of semiotic power of circulation, as we can see from this picture that are actually devised for artists. But to call, like what Arkady said, speaking about artists, what Arkady said today. And I would like to provoke you with the idea of, Arkady, you said today, we finished when we will have a name to each death. And I said that maybe you're not, it was one of your convinced points, maybe it was about the impossible death and impossible mourning. But I would like to provoke you with the idea of, once we told already, about the Argentina and VAI. And when this will be finished, we saw in the case of slavery, in the case of Argentina, and also your point today, let's see in the story, the moment, what something was, if not done, but had at least a moment of changing. And all this forensic turn that started there, and then we are still trying to working with forensic, with this idea. There's something that we have discussed, medical, artistic devices, cemetery, mass graves. There's something that was in Argentina and we don't have here, which I think is the social movement behind these kind of meetings and the listing. And but this is my idea, because there are social movements but are scattered, are not linked together. So I would like to provoke with this aspect, because we have been talking about medical forensic, artists, and etc. But what about that? Thank you.
You want to react?
Just because you mentioned Argentina, otherwise. No, I completely agree with what you said. And I have the feeling that we are lacking that, not because it doesn't exist, but because it is too scattered, too unorganized, too crossed by thousands of struggles, internal struggles. And the one thing I do know today, which I didn't know 2 years ago, talking about Argentinians' story with the disappeared thing, is that we were very happy because we had, and I'm talking in past tense, a huge social movement behind. It doesn't seem to be that clear now, nowadays in Argentinian politics, and the way Argentinians support a revisionist government. And that makes us, many of us, think that this social movement might not be that strong enough, and that is something that always is subjected to reconfigurations and never acquired. Can we say that? Yeah, we never have it. We really need to keep on working on that, because now I really want to cry if I read the papers in Argentina. And we were so proud of being the first in Latin America, of all you know. Now we are there.
I can't see you, but I can also agree with your analysis. Or I think the movement in Europe is rather weak. So and you can also split it in different movements. There's a strong movement doing rescue at sea, working at camps, taking care, social aid. But politically, it's enormously divided. And I think for one reason, it's that in Argentina, the families are in Argentina. So that's far more easy. And here, the families are far away and don't even know and don't want to know. And that's hard to create a movement when at the same time, and now I get, let's say, to my analysis of European politics, I say already for years, there is no vision on migration. And all our vision on migration, so all our politicians' vision on migration is coming from fear for losing votes to the populist. So the whole populism is a danger, and populism is related to nationalism. So we are one Europe, but every country wants first to have own interest, and every politician wants to be re-elected. And it means that makes that for NGOs and for action groups and so on, it's very hard to fight, because they fight mainly against populism and they don't win anything. And to fight for difficult border things, that's not happening, in my opinion. I'm seldom on meetings where there's a strong movement together. Maybe in March 2 years ago, the March on Brussels with a big community. But usually these groups have almost no outreach.
Yeah. When I hear this, throughout these 2 days, sometimes I was also on the verge of crying. Also at this moment, when I hear these stories, there's a kind of desperateness, like, look what we have been doing all those years. What has changed? We still have the numbers there. So there's a kind of desperateness. But on the other hand, also throughout these days, there was this kind of hope, not in this Christian way of sanctuary, but in a kind of, okay, we have done so much already. When I see we have done this, the list, we have all the data. We have the work of Cristina, of Caterina, of Felipe. We have the work of Arkady. And the thing is, and it's sometimes it's maybe cruel to say, but we do have a lot of information, which of course also says that there has been a lot of crime. But I do think that what keeps me doing this and what prevents crime the whole time is that I do see that this could be momentum. I mean, we are here. We are not only academics or activists. We are different identities where all these things happen in the same way. You're an expert on data, Geerts. I mean, so no, but we do gather information, and we started a project in Ghent, thinking that we could create like a new list with all the information, but we had to limit the scope, because the moment we tried to connect to the local administration, to the local activists, to the local theaters and the local venues who were implementing Necropolis of Arkady, we already had so much. So we had to be more humble and focus on a local thing. And then we truly felt the social movements, that was happening, and that we not always perceived. So I do think we are preparing a huge case of genocide in some distant future. But I do think that doing that, we need to hyphenate. And I'm very happy, Cristina, that we will hyphenate soon. And we developed this kind of protocol, because we're also working with data people and Atelier Cartographique, and they're creating like toolbox of how to hyphenate lists and how search engines are rendering different systems compatible. For example, Mort de la Rue, they're working with an email system. And we connected it with a list of Geerts, so that, or not we, I mean Atelier Cartographique and the whole team connected it, so that when someone dies in the street, it can be connected with the list of Geerts. So it's about rendering compatible, and everyone is doing something. And I do believe that this is where this kind of hope can be located or situated, that keeps us going, that keeps our motor going, that we hyphenate among all these different things. So, yeah, I don't know.
No, I don't know.
Can I say one small reaction? Because I mean, I'm also positive. Maybe I should also say that I'm positive to meet now, also in Zagreb, like a month ago, scientists that are really involved and that are almost becoming activists. And no, but that is not so common in research. So I think 10 years ago it was completely different. There were some people working on this topic, but in a very dry way, researching, making statistics and whatever. And what I really like to see is that people that really look at it now deeper from a scientific point of view see that this is going completely wrong, and they start to I'm sure there will be more and more publications about what is going wrong, and that helps also. That was 30 years ago only the NGOs. I think then the churches jumped in because they see this from kind of commemoration point of now a lot of self-organized groups and also researchers. So we will change the world in the end.
Thank you for these positive words. Thank you very much. So now we get a coffee break, and we'll be back in